Hi, good afternoon, everyone. A very warm welcome to the 14th edition of Best Practice DSCI Best Practice Meet. I would like to welcome you all in this interesting session on security inside out, outside in. We'll have a discussion in the context of digital attacks, surface management, digital risk protection, and cyber asset management as a part of this session. Now, I would like to invite a panelist for this particular session. So, first, I would like to invite Mr. Saket Verma. He is Vice President and Country Leader Cybersecurity at Kyndryl. So, hello, Mr.
Hi
Saket.
everyone. Hi
Good
Harshita.
afternoon.
Nice to be
Good
here.
afternoon.
Thanks. Good
So, I
afternoon.
would like to inform that Mr. Saket will moderate this session as well. Now, I would like to invite Mr. Vinayak Srimal. He is Senior Information System Officer at Indian Navy. Okay. Next, I would like to invite Mr. Anil Saraswat. He is General Manager, Information Security, Samsung India Electronic, Mobile and R&D Division. Can we have Mr. Anil on stage? Hi,
Hi,
Mr.
thank
Anil.
you. Very good afternoon. Thank you
Hi.
very much.
Yeah.
Hi,
Next,
Saket.
we have Dr. Nikhil Tripathi. He's Assistant Professor at Indian Institute of Information Technology, Sri City.
Yeah, hello. Yeah, thank you, Harshita. Good afternoon, everyone.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon, Nikhil.
Yeah. And finally, we have Mr. Vikas Yadav. He is CISO at Nykaa. So I would like to welcome Mr. Vikas on the stage. Hi, Mr. Vikas. Welcome all the panelists to this discussion. So now I would like to hand over to Mr. Saket as he will be moderating this session. Over to you, Mr. Saket.
Thanks,
Thanks.
Harshita. Thanks a lot. And so nice to be here with industry colleagues, stalwarts, and for all the participants, we have a great mix of academia, industry, and the forces, right? And we hope to have Vinayak ji shortly if possible. So great, Anil, Vikas, and Nikhil. So before I sit and get deeper into the discussion, I think it is in the best of fit of things to set the context for the best practices meet 2022. As we all know, the topic being cybersecurity inside out and outside in, the question always is that why the whole world is so concerned, why are we all discussing and debating the various aspects of this topic. So in my view, there are three forces which are at play, and which have never been at play the way we are experiencing them now. So first and foremost is the hacker intention and the hacker community motivation itself. So right, so previously it was about service disruption, being naughty, maybe for some amount of for a few bucks, etc. But now that whole motivation angle itself has changed. Now it's a lot more heinous. It's a lot more disruptive. It's a lot more damaging. The states also come into the play, so it's also kind of a country warfare element comes in. It's about something beyond just service disruption or kind of charging a few bucks here and there. So the seriousness of this whole and of the hacker intention itself, that dimension has completely changed. So the enormity of the downside for the enterprises has changed. The enormity for the state, as in a sovereign state, and the enormity for individuals, the downside has also completely, the color has changed. Apart from the motivation aspect, these actors are much more sophisticated and well equipped today than they were 10 years back. So you have automated scripts doing it. You have kind of sleeper agents, dwelling for 300, 400, 800 days into your network and then doing the damage that they were supposed to do. So the sophistication of the community itself has really, really exponentially, what should I say, improved in a negative sense. So that's one theme, one force. The other being the force of globalization itself. And globalization has really again taken shape in the last decade and a half in terms of the supply chains and the networks, cross-country networks being so much, interdependent and enmeshed. So from a cybersecurity perspective, the malicious threats, they travel very fast, they travel without borders, and again, the downside risk gets magnified at an enterprise level, at a country level, at a individual level, right? So there are no borders as far as cybersecurity threats are concerned. So that's another dimension of globalization for you. The third force which is doing is very interesting, which we all live, which we are all living day and night. I think after breathing, the other thing which a human is doing today is experiencing digitization. So it is as close to an exercise like breathing, right? Now, digitization is showing us the twin facets. Again, from a cybersecurity perspective, because there are companies which are what we call, let's say, cloud natives, the whole company is a digital entity. So the risk for the company is from a digital side is equivalent to the whole business risk. So the business and the digital avatars are synonymous now, because these companies are, I need not take any names, we all know, we all use them. So the apps that you have on your mobile, just imagine, if they go down, the whole business goes down, because these digital natives are nothing but the app, right, which we are using. So the stakes get multiplied, because there's no steel mill working there, and there's no ingots getting shipped out, and the whole company is working on an app, and the products and the service is getting shipped through the app. So if the digital environment goes down from at any level, the business goes down. So synonymity between digital presence or the digital avatar and the business is now complete. The second aspect from a digital perspective is one of the elements of our discussion here is the threat vector exposure, or what we use different words depending on what we say is the attack surface area or the threat vectors. The whole attack surface area becomes, the whole business is exposed, because the business is, as I said, the digital avatar, and the whole digital avatar is the attack surface. So the risk again goes up multifold. So because of these all three forces, as you would have seen, whether it is globalization, whether it is digitization, or it is the hacker sophistication or motivation, the cyber risk downside has exponentially increased. So it has now the power to take down states, to take down businesses, and to really make the life of an individual very, very miserable. So that's the context, and what we will do now is that, given this kind of a backdrop, we now see the whole importance of consolidation as a theme, right? Cybersecurity consolidation, and how do we approach it outside in and inside out. As I said, we have a great panel here. We have Mr. Vinayak from the Indian Navy joining us. Welcome, Vinayak ji. Now we have an academician in Mr. Nikhil. We have Mr. Vinayak from the armed forces, and we have two industry stalwarts, Mr. Anil and Vikas ji, to give different perspectives. What I'll do is, with this backdrop, I will start with each of you. I'll go one by one and take your prelim views on the subject, right? I'll start with Anil ji, and Anil ji, as you are leading the security pillar for a great brand, for one of the biggest and greatest multinationals on the planet today. What is your approach to, and what keeps you awake in the night from an organizational cybersecurity risk perspective?
Thank you. You have very well summarized, very nicely woven the threads about this. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So nicely set the context for this. So if we look at right now, as you asked me that what awakes me, that thing, and not only me, I think all the security community members, right? The way business collaboration has increased, the way our attack surface has increased. So we have a concept like IoT and BYOD, bring your own device, right? So for me, that bring your own device is actually bring your own disaster, because I don't know what kind of device you're hooking in from, what the location, what the health of a device, which is coming into my network. And by any chance, if any security vulnerability which exists, though we try to discover and fix, but any 0 day or unknown or undiscovered vulnerability exists, then you enter as a legitimate user can create havoc throughout the organization. So that's a big risk. And also the business dynamics are changing overnight. We are collaborating or with various partners, various vendors. So if one is like protected, we also have a continuous risk assessment for our partners. Are they fully protected? Do you have a resilience system in place? Do they monitor all the threats and fix them on timely basis? And also, often we have seen that business, because of urgency, whether in terms of launching services or any support, or to compete with competitors, there's always an edge of time. So speed matters. However, from the security perspective, security requires certain amount of time to assess the overall security posture. So that also like sometimes try to overrun the time or control security control versus business requirement. So we have to be very, very like speedy in terms of those things. And so nowadays attack surface is as much as you can count on types of sophisticated attacks which have grown exponentially, as you rightly said. And also we also need to look at that we need to update ourselves continuously. The traditional conventional system cannot protect the modern sophisticated attacks which are happening. Let it be a data, let it be a identity, let it be a infrastructure or endpoints, whatever.
Great.
So that's my
Great
view.
point, Anil. I think you have pressed the right buttons in terms of from an enterprise perspective, what are the key challenges and the key concerns that a CISO or a CIO or the company leadership will have. I'll move on to a different view now. So let's move on to the armed forces and I'll come back to you, Nikhil. So Vinayak ji, from a from your perspective, from your environment perspective, what are your priorities? You are, of course, in a different environment than the commercial enterprises. So, what's your approach and what are your key priorities?
Good afternoon, Saket. I'd just like to open with a great saying from the philosopher Sun Tzu. He had said that if you know the enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. And the corollary to that is that if you do not know the enemy and you do not know yourself, you will succumb in every battle. I think that sums up the challenge of and the puzzle posed by asset security and asset management to the cybersecurity world today. Now, in this world of zero trust and all these buzzwords, these new buzzwords, asset management rarely gets the traction that is due to it. Whereas asset management forms the very basis and the foundation for the physical and the logical security program of any organization. Also, traditionally, asset management has been looked upon as an IT function and not a cyber security function. Nothing can be farther from the truth, because unless we know what we own and where those ownership lies, we cannot take any step forward. Now, asset is defined as anything that has value to an organization, and typically it is sent into three buckets of people, processes, and technology. So when we're looking at the technology aspect, what is the end goal of an asset management program? The end goal of an asset management program is to have centralized controls, total asset visibility in the face of distributed network and infrastructure. Now, why cyber assets have come into focus and prominence? With the virtualization of software, storage, everything moving into this layer 7 of the OSI model, the number of cyber assets, are just outnumbering the physical assets that we have. Now, the typical problem with these intangible assets is, once something that you can physically see, there is a sense of security about that. But when you have something which is not physically seen as exists somewhere in the virtual world, there are typical issues which are associated with them. One being, if there are supply chain vulnerabilities in those softwares, or are there any IP intellectual property issues? Where is the ownership for the open source software associated with it? So these are the typical issues associated with these cyber assets. Also, with the growth, like Anilji brought out, with the growth of cloud, IoT, hybrid work, the attack surface has just increased exponentially. And the first, second, third, and third degree associations between all these assets has just grown vertically. So, in the face of all these challenges, now we have vendors who are giving third-party security solutions. And the whole challenge is to integrate all these solutions with all the assets that we have. So that is where the security inside out approach is the most useful, because unless we know what we hold ourselves, we cannot go to our vendors, cannot go to our support partners and ask them what is to be done. So that's where I feel that the inside out approach and consolidation of assets, the periodic review of assets counts really, really well. Thank you.
Great. So Vinayji, from you, what we all understand is the whole criticality of the inside out approach, and the fact that this cyber security is a journey in itself. It has to be a process driven, continuous sport. It cannot be a one time kind of activity. That's very fundamental to the way we need to approach cybersecurity inside out. Moving on to Vikas ji, again coming back to a classical, should I say, maybe perhaps born on the cloud organization from all practical purposes. Vikas ji, you lead the cybersecurity initiatives, and you're battling out the naughty boys and girls in the world, right? From a cybersecurity perspective. So what's your view of the lay of the land when it comes to an organization like Nykaa, right, which is most of the business is through the digital means. So what are the top how do you spend your day, and what takes the maximum amount of time, effort from your perspective? So within let's say life, a day in the life of Vikas Yadav. So how do you divide your 24 hours, and what would take your maximum time and attention, and what would be, of course, your key concern?
Thanks, Saket. I think there are two aspects of the coin. Where you spend your 24 hours is finally dependent on what stage of the startup journey is, or what stage of your security roadmap you are in. If you talk about when you're initially entering an organization, I think it's all about discovering what you need to protect. That can be more from a technical perspective, where you can think of using various attack surface management tools to detect externally, and then using your asset inventories internally to discover. I think then slowly as you mature, you build out a larger chunk of your strategy in terms of what you need to tackle. I think knowing what you need to protect is obviously the first step. That you can use by leveraging both open source and attack surface management tools. I'm very big a proponent of doing an open source intelligence scan of your environment regularly on a quarterly or a periodic basis, and changing providers, both doing internally and externally. But however, I think security is much more than a technical aspect as alone. When you go forward in your security journey, you think about things like vendor risk management, which Anil brought out. There's a huge lot of vendors whom you interact with. So however strong your own organization may be, the how you interact with your vendors and how you ensure that they have access to data, as well as how they're accessing your systems. So both ways you have to protect yourself. Now, even when they have access to your data and so are storing or doing some data on your behalf, then that factor also comes in as to how strong are your legal and regulatory practices as well. Do you audit them regularly? Do you check their standards? Is it a one-off audit, or is it a more continuous affair? So I think vendor risk management also plays an important role. As you grow, as the organization grows bigger, you need to consider facts like what are you protecting? Are you protecting just a platform? You're protecting data? You're protecting your brands? So now there are a lot of areas which will come in. It could be brand management, brand protection with various tools which are available, where it tells you what fake websites are there, what fake apps are there. It could be hardcore technology issues like how secure your coding is. Let's say when you talk about how are developers developing code, are there being one is the conventional way. What we all do is, let's say, okay, fine. There's a code which has been shipped. It's deployed. How do I do it? I just test the application. I discover the bugs and I throw them at the developers and please go ahead and solve it. Or do I try and shift left and solve the problem with the core? What do? You train developers. Now, training developers is not a mechanism which gives you instant insight. It'll take some time. You'll need to uh, look at certain aspects like, okay, how you can initiate basic practices, let's say OAS top 10. Then how do you slowly start training them on writing secure code? So now this takes a long journey. It's not something which you can do immediately, but whereas a VAPT or a application security testing solution can be done within a week or two, but trying to mature the security quotient of your developers will be a long journey, which will contain training them, making them aware, ensuring that you have a feedback loop. Let's say once they're trained, ensuring they're tested. It will also include certain secure code design principles. So you'll have to put in principles around code design as well. Then you also need to leverage tools like uh, secure code review tools as well. You can't do everything on a. You can train your developers all you want, but if you can automate things during the testing, that will be better. So now that is as far as the core technical is concerned. Now I think one of the most maybe neglected aspects is also the fact that you really need to know where your businesses are going on. How is it operating? Let's say, do you have a new application which is being hosted by by an entity which has just been acquired or merged with? Do you know of any shadow IT which any department is using? So I think there are a lot of facets like this, right from attack surface management to vendor risk management to your secure coding design principles. And I can talk about each one of them as we go along. But the crux is that you need to be have a right mix of technological as well as business knowledge, and also a process oriented way, so that you can do this. And as to where I spend my time, I think it's very difficult for any CISO to quantify where do you spend your time.
No, no,
Maybe
that was
you
more
structure
figuratively.
the
Yeah,
thing, but I think you do as the situation demands.
yeah. I think because you already covered a very broad canvas in a very succinct way. So from an enterprise perspective, yes, I think we all got a good pulse of the enormity of the challenge that you face from various perspectives, right? Including the development cycle, DevSecOps as well. So that's very interesting. And that also gives all of us, the participants and the industry folks at large, kind of challenge a CISO uh, or a CIO in today's world is facing, right? Because from a CISO function perspective, as Vinayak said, the Sun Tzu, saying that, if you don't know your enemy, or you don't know yourself, then it's very difficult to win. And here we have an enemy, who keeps mutating, who keeps changing. So the way the cybersecurity challenge again magnifies itself is that you are dealing with a very federated enemy, because it can come in various shapes and avatars. It can come as a, a malware. It can come as a from an email perspective. So you need email security, you need web security, you need endpoint security. So all these, it can be a DDoS attack, so on and so forth, right? Even cloud security. And I will come to you, Vikas ji, on cloud security, later on. So the point to be made is that here's the mutating enemy, which is highly federated, and it is like juggling 10 balls which keep changing their color, and you have to catch the red balls, let's say. So that's where, the agility and the smartness of the the CISO function really comes to the fore, and everybody now, it's of course at a board level, imperative now, and all the cybersecurity discussions now are definitely being more and more reviewed by the boards, and the discussion is right there at the high table. So coming from now, switching gears, moving from the boardroom to the classroom, I would like to move on to Dr. Nikhil Tripathi from Triple IT, who has been working in this area from a academia perspective. So Dr. Nikhil, what's your view from as academician? How do you see this whole area panning out? The industry approach, as you heard, is either outside in or inside out, or people try to balance it. So from a threat intelligence perspective, from a cybersecurity overall risk management perspective, we discussed about the attack surface kind of challenges which are ever increasing. So how are you tackling? Which are the problems that you are focusing on, and what's your area of interest?
Okay, so thank you for the question, Saketji. I think, am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
Yeah, okay, perfect. Yeah. So thanks for the question, Saketji. So since I'm from academia, I think, yes, it would be better if I answer the question from the perspective of cybersecurity research in the academic domain. So typically, researchers in the community, they recommend to focus more on inside-out approach. That's what I believe, and that's what basically researchers are recommending. And it is not that they deny to use the outside-in approach, but they recommend to focus more on the inside-out and then outside-in approach, basically. So usually academic researchers, what they do, they suggest that using inside-out approach, we should first explore potential vulnerabilities in our assets, find the overall attack surface, analyze them, study how things can go wrong in the presence of these vulnerabilities, and what things can go wrong, and what is the likelihood of the attacks, and etc. And when we talk about the potential vulnerabilities in our assets, it depends on the resources that we are using, ranging from the operating system, the services running on our assets. It can be web services or mailing services, and basically the software implementations that are running these services. So let me take and explain this with an example. Actually, let's say we have web services running on our assets. Now, we should first explore vulnerabilities in the HTTP protocol itself. Basically, identify the vulnerability, identify the severity, and then appropriately patch them. Then, what we recommend as a researcher in academics domain is that we should explore the vulnerabilities in the software implementation. So basically, we have different software implementations of all these protocols. For example, if we are using, let's say, any web server, maybe Apache or anything else for that matter, we should explore the vulnerabilities in it, identify their severity, and appropriately patch them. Then comes the vulnerability analysis at operating system level. Same steps again we should take here also. Now, once the assets are secured, usually academic researchers, they recommend that after this, of course, we can go ahead with the outside-in approach, where we can try to test the security level from outside by using techniques like such as vulnerability assessment and penetration testing. And researchers usually they also categorize this as a black box approach, this particularly this outside in approach, because there is no inside information available, and the testers need to find ways in which an attacker can damage the assets from outside. Once it is known, different levels of security mechanisms can be deployed, and which different security mechanisms, intrusion detection systems, intrusion prevention systems, web application firewalls, and so on. So overall, the academic research in CISEC domain suggests to use both the approaches for a proper cyber hygiene. And that's all from my side as far as academic point of view on security consolidation is concerned. Thank you.
Great, Dr. Nikhil. I think that was a good pulse of what's happening in academia and what are the areas of interest for researchers like you. What is the state of the art, in which direction the research folks are marching ahead. Um, with this, I'll come back to Anil ji, again shifting gears and coming to the corporate environment. Um, so Anil ji, uh, so when we talk about outside in approach, and particularly from a enterprise perspective, and that to a multinational large enterprise like Samsung, um, visibility takes center stage, right? And visibility of uh, and for various stakeholders. Now, whether it is a responder or an investigator or a line of or a line business line leader or a board level member, what's your view on on ensuring the right visibility to these various stakeholders across the hierarchy, and how do you tackle these kind of, so what do you do, how do you build your, let's say, tooling kind of tools framework or services framework, or what's your approach to visibility across the hierarchies for the right stakeholders so that they have the visibility of the right dashboards, right information?
Sure. Thank you. So, as Dr. Nikhil and Mr. Vikas and Mr. Vinayak also rightly pointed out, that assets are one of the first and foremost identification of attack surface, where the assets plays a key role in the primary consideration which we consider. So, the more we discover, the more we are aware about our environment, are aware about our assets, aware about our exposure to threat, you know, platform, threat attack surface, the more we can assess and define the appropriate controls which are required to mitigate and thwart any attack which is likely to come. That's one aspect, and there are various tools which are available for BAPT. I would not name any specific tool, but various industry specific tools are available which can give you the good stronghold for these things. And secondly, the one important aspect that we have so many sophisticated, not in generally for my organization, but in general, I'm giving you from the enterprise perspective, that many organizations have different sophisticated solutions which might be working in silos. So there's a huge amount of log which are getting generated, but to get the actionable items from those logs is a where the value comes on real, actionable items where you can take action. Otherwise, those logs are just piece of text which is lying unattended, right? And so many false positives which are there that may again give a leeway to the hackers that you may miss out the real incident which is likely to come. And apart from that, the other aspect of that, which you said, that we also need to build a framework. It's not just like point and approach, which you rightly mentioned, where you see and do a patchwork and that move away. No, you need to define a solid framework that should have a right framework with what all assets are being clubbed into it. Risk is being analyzed and mitigated, not only for your partners, whatever the collaborative platforms that you have, wherever you are giving the entry to the outsiders, and including your employees, including your business partners, inside out also as well as outside in. It's not that only one aspect is going to mitigate these things. We need to think holistically and see that that's what we do. So we take all into considerations, then as creation of asset registers. And one of the most important aspect is the one is a 5-step process which I was talking about. First is that you need to identify your asset these things. Then you should also have a incident response plan, because if you do not have incident response plan, then it may be a reactive approach. You may not find out what and how to protect because you are not prepared for that, right? And most of these attacks which has the strategy to land and expand. So we need to minimize the radius, the blast of the radius, which is going to affect through your segmentations of network and isolating your critical or you know jewel crown that we talks about, that we do. So there's a whole lot of systems. We use integrated platform management, which consolidate and gives us a holistic view of all, including endpoints, servers, networks, all the aspects of technology and security, which they talk and give a collective, actionable, real-time threat, perspective to take action on that. And also, as you rightly mentioned, that whenever any issue happens, everybody looks at CISO. We invested so much. We have shiny firewall and this appliance is why this happened, right? So the security should also is moving. I'm happy to say that security is moving from not only from the security team, everyone is involved, including employee. They understand from I to you that without you, security is incomplete. So that's where I think we are able to communicate. Over to you, Saket.
Great comments, Anilji. I think that was very insightful. Coming back to you, because we very quickly, because we want to spend some time with our participants in the Q&A. So, as the last few minutes, wanted to have your perspective on cloud security in particular. Coming from an organization like Nykaa. So, any perspective that you want to share with our participants here on what you think are the key aspects of cloud security from a practitioner point of view. You are on mute.
Apologies.
Yeah, no
I
worries.
think the key points about cloud security would be to leverage cloud securely. Securely, I think there are too many topics to be aspects to be covered in a short conversation. But I'll say what you should do is ensure that you understand what you're adopting in cloud, be it from an infrastructure as a service like AWS or a SaaS. So what you need to do is the first adopt and ensure the security controls of the native solution are exploited well. Example, let's say you go to AWS, you ensure all native security controls are and best practices are implemented. You pick up the white paper of either AWS, Azure, or GCP and implement the best practices which are there. Second, you also have to understand that so what cloud does is that it gives you a different perspective or a different set of risks which come with it. So the advantages are like you get much better visibility than when you can get on-prem. But then all your assets are now online. So you have to ensure that when you build systems and applications, you have to ensure that whatever needs to be protected is not visible outside and is implemented with certain security controls. Then once you've implemented all the native security controls and understood it, then you should leverage newer tools like cloud security posture management and also certain other attack surface management tools to ensure that you optimize and ensure and find out what risks you may be facing. And finally, I think I'll say that whatever you finally deploy, let's say even if you're on the cloud, your application remains the same, whether it's on-prem or off-prem. So building a secure application with the same secure design principles which you earlier had, of shifting left, reviewing your BRD designs, and also ensuring your developers are trained on secure code practices and having certain secure coding design principles which your engineering managers and other aspects should follow would remain the same. So you've built in the same applications and then you ensure that they are followed. So I think to summarize, it will be to follow best practices of the native cloud security tool or practice which you use, and then continue to invest on the same principles which you did on on-prem. That would be my succinct observation on cloud best practices.
Great, great. I
And I
think
think the last one would be to leverage tools and technologies from Cloud Security Alliance. I think they got a very good set of tools and technologies. Maybe that could also be a useful input.
great, great. I think that summarizes it well, because cloud security, as we know, is public cloud has been proliferating like at a breakneck speed in the last 5 to 7 years, and uh, the unfortunate corona wave only accentuated the proliferation of the public cloud. So more and more workloads have already moved and are moving to the public cloud, so on and so forth. So and we have 3 or 4 players who have been monopolizing this market. So going forward, the way the planet will be inherited by, looks like in the short term at least, medium term, by the public cloud providers. So we need to have very clear view, the way you articulated, on cloud security, especially for organizations which are cloud natives, but even for most of other organizations which might be moving to the public cloud. So you need to have a, as you rightly said, a strategy in place. You have to exploit the native controls very well, right? And then you need to have all those hygiene practices which you are following on-prem. Make sure that you are adapting them in a cloud environment. So I think, yes, definitely quite insightful. Now, from a conversation and a time management perspective, we have around 6 minutes left. So I wanted to also take a few questions. If the participants have any questions, we'll be open to taking them now. You can see in the chat box or in the Q&A section. Okay, so we do have questions here. So I'll go by upvote. So we have. So I think you already answered. What are the effective and efficient security management policies for cloud security governance? So that, to a large extent, Vikas ji had already, as part of our conversation, just explained. So then the next question is, we want to prepare framework considering all well-known frameworks. I'm not sure what is being.
I think there's a separate Q&A section as well where there's some questions are written.
So I think the new questions are at the end of this.
Okay. So that's kept in. So let us go down to the latest questions. Okay. A lot of questions on cloud security. I think last two questions got answered very well by Vikas ji.
Maybe I can just add, I think someone was mentioning what are the effective and efficient security management policies. Now, it all depends on organization to organization, but I will just say that Cloud Security Alliance is a good resource where you can go and pick up for specific cloud areas. They have got a good domain approach for all areas. But let's say if you are on AWS, you can pick up their AWS benchmark support. You can, for Azure, they have a separate one. For GCP, they have another separate one. So that can be kept. As far as I think someone additionally asked, how do you define the additional cost for security on the cloud? I wish everything was free, but I think I wish, let's say, the users told us that for all security, we could just give it to you free. But I think, unfortunately, all the cloud service providers also charge for their native services. And I think therein lies the battle of understanding what is how cost effective. You can't blindly pick up any and every cloud native security control and implement it. One simple example would be, I will not name the solution provider, but there's a data discovery and tool. So now that's very, very costly on that particular cloud service provider. So you will not blindly pick it up. So there is always a cloud estimator and a pricing tool. Pick that up and then implement it. And yes, security is an expensive solution. So spend judiciously is all I say, and first work on first principles of securing and not allowing any data to be public.
Saketji, if I can just interject, somebody asked, if there's a framework of frameworks which can be used for figuring out the security. I think a better approach, there are amalgamation of various frameworks, but it is better to assess one framework according to the requirements of the organization and then customize it to the requirement of the organization, rather than looking for a framework of frameworks which supposedly would cover all aspects. I don't think there is any framework which is built so perfectly. So it is better to tailor one framework and use it to your requirement.
Yes, I think there are no magic potions, as you rightly said. It's different strokes for different folks. There's no single magic potion, and also we can't be lazy. We'll have to engineer our solutions based on our organizations, as Vinayak ji and LG and Vikas ji said. So depending on the nature of your environment, like you are saying, you will have to. You can't be lazy in trying to look for a magic potion or a one-size-fits-all. It will never be, at least in cybersecurity. So with that, I have one last.
If I can just add one more thing, we've spoken about a lot of technology and the framework, but what we missed out is the human factor. The people are our biggest strength and could be the weakest chain in the link also, link in the chain. So it's important to have that awareness program empowering the people. If somebody comes up with a problem or something which sounds out of the blue, we have to give that its due importance.
Correct. Very correct. I think that because of the paucity of time, we couldn't cover many other points in cybersecurity, and we were limited by the topic and the perspective. Here, so one last question, any of you can pick it up, is so there's a question on how can you use zero trust to mitigate 5G security challenges, and there's a related question that with 5G coming in, there will be zillions and millions and billions of devices getting attached. So how do we tackle the attack surface challenge in that scenario? So it's largely around 5G, zero trust, and the increase in the attack surface because of the exponential increase in devices and the digital assets. So any of you can take the question, and this will be our
So,
last.
Saketji, if you want, I can answer this
Sure,
question.
sure, Anilji.
So, irrespective of any technology, the basic principle remains same. So, like zero trust principles, we have three principles of zero trust that we need to use to protect whether it's 5G or other technologies. First is do not believe, just verify explicitly. So you authenticate all users, validate them based on their user identity, location, and device health, data classification, workload, various other parameters also that you need to do. And the other principle, use least privilege. So we need to limit user access just in time, allow them just in time, and just enough access so that we can secure our data as well as increase productivity and limit other issues. And third is assume breach. You need to protect an organization that you have a breach in your environment. So you need to, as I earlier mentioned, you need to have a containment of blast radius. You need to have a segmentation of users. You should have an intelligent system, good analytics, which gives you the whole perspective of an organization. What are the risks which are there that you need to define, the controls, and enhance your threat defense system. That's all from us.
Excellent, excellent. I think in a few words you covered a lot in terms of the best practices. So your blast radius was pretty long. You covered a lot in the last question. So with that, I think we are nearing the end of the session. I hope and I believe that for all the participants and the esteemed panelists here, it was pretty enriching. The discussions were insightful. We all wish we had more time. Cybersecurity is such an interesting area, but I really, from the bottom of my heart, thank all the panelists for their time and insightful comments. I also thank the participants. I hope they found the session interesting and insightful. With that, I hand over the reins of the session back to Harshita.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Saket, and thank you all the panelists for a very insightful session. And it was really interested session. And thank you all the attendees for making this session interactive. We do have a lot of questions, and yeah, please feel free to touch with us if you have any further questions. We may take it offline as well. So with that, I would like to thank you everyone once again for joining us. And yeah, so this is the last session in this particular stage. Now we have a diversity track session by target at stage 1. So I request all the delegates to join us at stage 1. And once again, thank you for joining us in this particular session. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you,
Have a
everyone.
good day.
Thank you so much.
Thank you all participants.
Thank you.